Hello, and one word of advice. Never let anyone sign your checks. Welcome to Best of the Rest. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by my motivational co-host, Andrew Williams. Andrew, how are we doing today?
You know, I'm okay, Chris. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Obviously I started the episode with hello and a line from the movie, but I like the idea of someone, this being someone's first episode, and they think I just give some advice at the beginning of every episode. This week's advice: never let anyone else sign your checks. It's not bad advice.
It's not the worst advice.
Remember when Paulie screwed over Rocky in Rocky 5?
Yeah, and then he totally forgave Paulie for it, which makes him a greater man than I would have been.
No joke. Lost the robot and everything. But that's... Look, this is neither here nor there. We're not talking about Rocky. We did that already. Andrew, as of this recording, yesterday, me and a friend of the show, my wife, we held our annual mac and cheesy movie party. I believe we talked about this on the podcast before, but just to refresh everybody, every year we hold a party where every guest brings a mac and cheese or mac and cheese inspired dish, and we all eat tons of mac and cheese. There's a contest for best dish and best dish name, so everybody gets real creative what they name their dish, and then we end the party by watching a cheesy movie. This year, we watched Tammy and the T-Rex, which is a 1994 film that was shot straight to video. No one really saw it. The big thing with this movie is that it was shot as a rated R, campy, gory movie, but on home video, it got chopped to hell as PG-13. But in 2019, Vinegar Syndrome, company we talked about before, that I'm a big fan of, they released the full uncut version with all the gore and guts intact. And this movie is a blast, and oddly has a somewhat stacked cast. It's the first movie for Denise Richards, who's the titular Tammy, and Paul Walker, who's the titular T-Rex.
Wait. Hold on. Paul Walker is the T-Rex? Like, legitimately?
The plot of this movie is that Paul Walker is Tammy's boyfriend, but she has, like, an ex-boyfriend that's a real jerk, and he gets Paul Walker killed. But evil scientist takes out his brain and puts his brain into a robot dinosaur, an animatronic dinosaur. And then as the dinosaur, he's got to try to reconnect with Tammy and take revenge on the people that killed him. There's also a pizza boy in the movie played by, oh gosh, I should have the actor's name pulled up because he's Pedro for Napoleon Dynamite.
Really?
How everyone knows him. Yeah, it's just his first movie as well.
That's like 14 years before that.
It is.
All right, let's look at this. That's Efren Ramirez. Oh, wow. Apparently, the Doctor is played by Terry Kaiser, notably known as Bernie of Weekend at Bernie's.
Yes. Yes.
My God.
It is a delightfully campy movie. It knows exactly what it is. It was a blast, a huge hit. Andrew, you were at the party last year. We watched My Boyfriend's Back, which we've also sung the praises of. I think you would also greatly enjoy Tammy and the T-Rex. I recommend it to anybody out there listening.
Some of these mac and cheese names were really, really good this year. Like
the winning dish was Mad Max. Max spelled M-A-C-S, and they made 5 different types of mac and cheese. Super clever.
The cornbread one with the corn logo, I was a big fan of.
Yeah, that was fantastic. They all tasted great. It was a great turnout and taste, and I'm happy to say this was our 7th year, but 6th party. We had the date 2020 off. And for the first time, I won Best Dish. My dish was the Pig Mac. I'll play on Big Mac, you see. I smoked some pork belly and then fried it in a skillet. My mac and cheese, I used cavatappi noodles, which are corkscrew noodles, like a pigtail.
Nice.
You see?
Nice.
And I smoked some cream cheese to put in the sauce. So it was super smoky, super creamy. My secret ingredient, which I'll tell on the podcast here, was hot honey. I used the spicy honey to glaze the pork, so it had this sweetness to it, and I mean, it was delicious. But I mean, everything was great. Friend of the show, my wife, she made some macaroni and cheese cookies.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that.
They were fantastic. So here's the thing. It's a very clever play on words here. They were macadamia nut cheesecake cookies. Mac and cheese. So when we say inspired, mac and cheese inspired, you can get real creative with it, and people turn out some pretty good dishes. But man, it was a good time. It's a good time.
The Agatha Christie's The Mac Murders is also very good.
I knew that one would have your heart.
It would. The corn logo on the cornbread one, though, that feels like it had to be Doug, but I doubt it was.
That was Reed, actually, and
all right.
He pulled up the corn logo on his phone and transcribed it very
Beautiful. Well. 10 out of 10, no notes.
Yeah, always a good time. Speaking of cheesy movies, though, it's summer camp month.
I was gonna say, watch it, buddy.
Hang on. Let me scratch that. That's not a good transition. I can do better than that. But Andrew, today we're not talking about cheesy movies, but we are going back to the 90s. Every week we take a second look at a movie that was poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It is summer camp month, and this week we are talking the 1995 film Heavyweights. Andrew, look, we've talked off air here. I know you're excited to jump into this one, so tell the people, what is your history with this movie?
I saw this movie in theaters.
Oh, wow. Actually, I didn't know that. I know you're a big fan. I did not know you saw this in theaters.
I have a very vivid memory of this. So what the deal was, this was February of 95. Let me take you back. So that was the year that I would have turned 8. But it was the year that my family was moving back to Texas. We were moving from Pennsylvania to Texas. I do not know why we were moving at this time. Okay. But what I remember happening is our car broke down at my aunt's house. Now, I don't remember where my aunt lived. I think it was Kentucky, maybe at the time.
You were driving from Pennsylvania to Texas?
Yes, my family was.
Okay.
That was how we were moving. That was back when you loaded everything into a moving truck and you shipped the moving truck on the way by itself. Yeah. And then we moved down in this station wagon that around my aunt's house started having problems. And we ended up sticking around there for a few more days than I think we intended. And at one point, we all went to the movies. It was me, my dad, my uncle, and I think my cousins too, and my siblings. And we saw Heavyweights. So I actually have a very specific memory of watching this movie while my family were waiting for their car to get fixed in a whole nother part of town, the country even. So I saw this in theaters. I would come down there. I was 7 years old, I believe. I finished the second grade once we got back, and then moved on to whatever comes after the second grade. It was, so I have a very vivid memory of seeing this movie. I remember going to the movie theater. I think I even remember the cutout for it. So it must have been pretty close to opening weekend. To kind of have that be the case. But yeah, that was the thing.
That's really impressive because this movie, we'll get to it, not an impressive box office return, but you were one of the small group that saw this in theaters. Wow, I didn't know that. I'm pretty sure I did not see this in theaters. Saving it for the pod. Very smart, Andrew. You're
I tell you everything else. I can hold one thing back.
I definitely didn't see this in theaters, but I did see it as a kid. Must have been just a Blockbuster rental. Probably caught it on TV a few times. Remember watching it with my brother a few times. And this is one of those movies that I have not revisited much over the years for no specific reasons. Haven't gotten around to it, but certain scenes, certain characters have really stuck in my brain, and it was a joy to go back and watch. Not to spill the beans too early, but I had a great time rewatching this movie, and I'm excited to jump into it. Now, this movie was released February 17th, 1995, which is, especially back then, February is kind of the dumping ground. It's kind of a weird time to release this. Makes you think that maybe the studio didn't have a lot of faith in it. We'll get back to that. The movie was made on a budget of I have no idea. I cannot find this anywhere online. Like, usually it's super simple. It's like on the Wikipedia page. It's very easy to find a budget. I went to Box Office Mojo and all the usual places that I check for these things. There seems to be no official reporting of it out there that I can find. Maybe it is. I have my, again, guesses as to why that is. I'll come back around to it. At the box office, it only brings in $17.6 million. Very impressive that you were one of the people, you and your family, got to go see this movie. Or one of the few that did see it in theaters. Critically, it's honestly not well received. Now, we have a similar situation that we did last week talking about Ernest. On Rotten Tomatoes, it holds a 38% critic score. That's based on 8 reviews, extremely small sample size. They all seem to be retrospective reviews from the 2000s, which aren't super reliable when you're trying to gauge how a movie was initially reviewed. Andrew, I'm going to let you come around to the audience score here in a moment, but I, once again, wanted to do my due diligence. I dove into mrqe.com to try to find some reviews from the time. This review was published by Variety, February 19th, 1995. This is their opening little paragraph, Andrew. There's never been a remotely significant summer camp film, and Disney's Heavyweights does nothing to advance the genre. Far worse, this yarn about an adolescent fat farm is shameful in its execution and content. It should be in and out of theaters in a couple of weeks, shortly joining the company's equally illustrious Camp Nowhere in relative obscurity in the dark recesses of video stores.
God
man,
damn.
that is harsh.
Like, I'm sorry. Like, good lord. Like, I would expect the movie to be, like, horrendous for something like that. Like,
yes.
I mean, I did the same thing I did. I went to Metacritic, which sometimes dates all the reviews that it puts on these things. And man, yeah, they're not kind. There are some, like, obviously some retrospective ones that are far more favorable. There's even some contemporary reviews. There's one from the San Francisco Chronicle that gave it 3 out of 4. And that was in 1995. But yeah, wow. That is one of the most devastating reviews I've heard for anything.
Andrew, it gets worse.
Oh, no. Oh,
dude,
come on.
I'm going to read this. I debated
Oh, my
putting it on
God.
my notes here, but I'm going to read this. This is
my God.
an excerpt from the Washington Post, February 17th, 1995.
Oh, my God.
I want to make it very clear. These are their words I'm about to read.
Oh, my God.
Make no mistake about it. Disney's Heavyweights is the best movie about calorically challenged pubescent boys at summer camp ever made, bar none. Considering that there are no other movies about calorically challenged pubescent boys at summer camp, this may not be the bold statement some take it to be. Oh, that's so clever. Sorry, editorializing. They continue. But Heavyweights, which was directed by Stephen Brill, could win only in a competition with itself. Mind you, I can't believe they wrote this, Andrew. Mind you, this has nothing whatsoever to do with the fact that the male characters here, including the 18-year Camp Hope veteran Pat, are several hot fudge sundaes on the other side of well-stuffed and spend a goodly portion of the movie with their shirts off, bouncing like happy walruses off an overgrown whoopee cushion called the Blob. There's more to it. It's filled with, like, fat shaming, and then criticizes the movie for not having a clear, they say don't have a clear message. And it's, wow, 95, sometimes doesn't feel like that long ago until you read something like that. And it's like,
yeah.
What in the world are we publishing? Insane. So, yeah, at the time, not well received, I think, is
yeah, I think, like Variety, TV Guide Magazine, USA Today, Philadelphia Inquirer, all are negative reviews. Hollywood Reporter, Austin Chronicle, Tampa Bay Times, St. Louis Dispatch, Chicago Sun-Times, Chicago Tribune, Los Angeles Times, Baltimore Sun. A lot of them are like 2 out of 4. Like, a lot of them are like very down the middle. They're like, there's stuff to like, but they don't think it ultimately does anything with it.
I'm really baffled by this. I mean, I don't know. I like the movie, I've already said, and I'm not, it's not like critics always got to agree with me or be in line, but I don't know if it was somewhere in the Wikipedia or maybe it's like the Rotten Tomatoes blurb that says like this movie eventually found an audience as audiences caught up with Judd Apatow's style of humor. They kind of make it sound like as Judd Apatow became in vogue in the 2000s, people reflected back on Heavyweights and started liking it. But this movie is not full of Judd Apatow referent humor and improv style. There's nothing like his later movies. So I think it's a very weak excuse for this movie, quote unquote, finding an audience.
Fun fact, that Washington Post review is written by a gentleman named Hal Hinson, and a cursory search of him. Apparently, he is a relatively unpopular critic, as he is not afraid to give a polarized review. He apparently lauded Hudson Hawk, apparently gave a positive review to Super Mario Brothers, and would do things like that, apparently. So apparently he was kind of known for being the guy who...
Bit of a troll.
Bucked the trend, yeah, a little bit. Then again, like you said, that it was, he was hardly alone in not liking this movie. But, yeah, needless to say, and that's the thing. It's eight reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, and it's still a 38%. So even if they're all, like, contemporary reviews, most of them are still bad. It's kind of wild to me. This is something I would have expected to be a little bit more like an Ernest Goes to Camp. Like, it's kind of crept its way into, like, the low fresh area. But no, there's not a single review here on Rotten Tomatoes that's from before 2000. And yeah, it's still 3 positive and 5 negative. So not well liked, because people are dumb. I don't know.
But that audience score, though, Andrew. What's the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes?
The audience score on Rotten Tomatoes for Heavyweights is a 77%. That is possibly the biggest. It's probably the biggest swing in any movie that we've covered, maybe? I don't know
Let me check Venom real quick. That's the biggest one I can think of. Both Venom movies are a pretty big swing. Venom is 30% to 80%. So Venom has 50, a full 50% swing. But
all right, this isn't quite there.
It's in that ballpark, though.
This is right at about 40. Right at about 40 between the critics and the audience. And yeah, that's wild to me. Like, it's kind of nuts that it's. I guess I'm not shocked that the reviews aren't positive. Like, I guess it is just kind of, but I don't know. I love it. And is it nostalgia? Is it objective understanding of comedy? Is it knowing what my sensibilities are? Yes.
Let's take a look at the creative team of this movie, Andrew. It's written and directed by Stephen Brill, with co-writing credit from Judd Apatow. Apatow. I never know how to say this guy's name. It's very strange. Stephen Brill is the writer on Mighty Ducks, making him an alum of the show. Continues to write for that series on D2. And we talked about this, right? D2, The Mighty Ducks, is like the strangest sequel title ever. What in the world?
Yes.
Really? Is there another example of the first movie is The Mighty Ducks, and then the sequel is a phrase, and then the first movie? D2, The Mighty Ducks. It's a very strange naming convention. Speaking of, sorry, a bit of a tangent here. I've been thinking about this for a while. You know what series has a strange naming convention, Andrew? Ant-Man. Because each title just gets longer.
Yes.
First movie's Ant-Man, and then Ant-Man and the Wasp, and then Ant-Man and the Wasp in Quantumania. Like, if the next one, I swear, if it's Ant-Man and the Wasp in Quantumania, multiverse something, if it just gets longer.
What it needs to be is Ant-Man and the Wasp in Quantumania 2. That's the full circle of confusing titles. So is that the second Ant-Man movie? No, it's the second Quantumania movie.
And the third Wasp movie. Fourth Ant-Man. I can't think of any other series that does that. That literally 3 movies in is just a longer and longer title. Because, The Dark Knight kind of does this. Dark Knight and then Dark Knight Rises.
But the first one's Batman Begins.
So it'd be like if it was Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, Batman Begins, The Dark Knight Rises.
Think about this, though. You have Man of Steel Then you have Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Then you have Justice League. That makes no sense at all.
That's interesting. Although I have a hard time considering that.
They're not. I know. I'm mostly being dumb when I say that, but like,
well, they do seem to be. I don't know. We're not going on. This is some weird revisionist history with that, but we're not going down that road.
No, we're not.
Stephen Brill, also alum of the show because he is a writer on Ready to Rumble, which we have covered. And I think we discussed on that episode, he hops on the Adam Sandler train when he directs Little Nicky, and 80% of his output after that is Adam Sandler, Happy Madison movies, which, said it before, I'll say it again, great work if you can get it. No shade whatsoever for being in that camp.
Yeah, absolutely. Stephen Brill ain't got to worry about anything the rest of his life, and you know what? Good for him, because I do. Yeah, it's interesting because he directs this. He doesn't direct it before. He only writes the Mighty Ducks movies. He doesn't actually direct any of those. And so this is his like foray into directing, but I can only assume that it's the success of the Mighty Ducks that gets him this. Like, they basically, like, Disney was like, all right, your little Mighty Ducks movie made us $50 million. Your little Mighty Ducks 2 movie made us another $45 million. Fine, we'll give you the budget for Heavyweights. And I'll tell you this, like, this movie made $17.6 million. It was probably still profitable. Like, I can't imagine this movie cost more than, like, $6 to $8 million.
I don't know, because here's the thing, and I'm viciously typing and doing quick research as I say this, because I said I wanted to come back to this. My guess for the reason that we can't find a budget out there is Disney did some Hollywood budgeting to try to hide the numbers, fudge the numbers, and find a way to make it profitable. And what I wanted to look up really quick is the budget for the Mighty Ducks, which probably higher than Heavyweights because it's got, I don't know, a little bit. Well, I don't know. I think it's the same ballpark. Mighty Ducks was $14 million.
Wow. I would not have expected Mighty Ducks cost that much to make.
So if Heavyweights is $10 million,
then yeah, I guess so.
I don't know. It's right. I can't. I would guess it's at least $10 million to make Heavyweights. So
that just seems like Mighty Ducks. You've at least got all the hockey stuff. With Heavyweights, it just feels like that's so excessive. But who knows? I don't. And it's, again, it could be Hollywood math where they say it costs $10 million, but, whatever. Yeah. I'm not an accountant. I'm not even an actuary. I do have a friend who's an actuary, though. Yeah, I don't know. It's just tough. Like, $17.6 million is not an insignificant amount of money. It just feels odd that, I don't know. This is 90s Disney. Who knows what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like... I don't know. Like, obviously, I remember the Mighty Ducks. I remember like the promotions. I mean, that was a huge hit, huge thing, and everything. Huge franchise. I don't remember Heavyweights being a big deal. Like, I just saw it on home video. I would not have been surprised to learn this was a straight-to-video movie.
Oh, me either. By any
right?
means.
So I feel like the marketing push wasn't there. Granted, this is based off the memory of a 6-year-old kid or however old it was. I could be wrong, but the fact that we can't find a budget, the fact that it didn't make a lot of money, the fact that it was released in February, I don't know, it makes you feel like Disney gave up on this movie before it released. They dumped it, fudged some numbers to try to make it profitable in the back end. This is all conspiracy theory, tinfoil hat stuff. I don't have a valid source for this. This is just the feeling that I get as I go through these numbers.
I don't disagree, and it's very possible that that's what's going on. It's like I said, 90s Disney was a whole thing. But it's wild. It almost feels like, this might have been like, this might have even been his reward for Mighty Ducks too. Like, hey, you made us Mighty Duck. You wrote Mighty Ducks, made us $50 million. That's a good return on their $14 million investment. They're like, hey, we want a sequel. And he might have been like, hey, cool, I'll write you your sequel if you let me make my dumb little summer camp movie. And it's not uncommon to be like, hey, you do ours and then we'll fund your little thing. So who knows what the ultimate money is? Who knows what the ultimate budget was? Anything. But yeah, it definitely feels like this is something that found a life later. So who knows?
Judd Apatow, as we mentioned, is a co-writer on this script, and this is super early in his career. It's his first writing credit. He does some producing before this. He was in the business, certainly, but this is, I mean, I would say it's his big break, but, it's probably not turning too many heads with this box office return. But he has a minor hit shortly after this with Celtic Pride, which comes out in 1996. But, of course, it's not until The 40-Year-Old Virgin in 2005 where he explodes as a writer, as a director, as a producer, and kind of launches the whole Apatow-verse of films. Household name at this point.
Oh, yeah, it's interesting. Go ahead.
Sorry, this is real quick aside. Celtic Pride. It's the name of that movie, right? Daniel Stern. He's a big fan of the Boston Celtics. This is correct, right? Andrew, it just dawned on me, reading it now, that we say Celtics. Shouldn't it be Celtics?
It should
be,
The
word
yes.
is Celtic, right?
Yeah.
Why is the team called the Celtics?
Because Americans can't say things.
You think that's why?
Yes.
You don't think people in Boston or, like, Irish people have a strong... I've never heard anybody insist that it's Celtics, is I guess what I'm getting.
It's not. The team is 100% called the Boston Celtics.
But
it's based off of
Americans?
Irish ancestry, yeah.
Interesting.
But yeah, it's if somebody's there, it's Celtic, like 100%. No. So like you said Celtic Pride, you said Celtic Pride, and I was like, wait, what? And then I looked at what it was. I was like, oh no, that's probably correct.
Never dawned on me that we're just mispronouncing a word that I don't know. I guess I just so used to hearing Celtics my whole life.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I know it's okay. Anyway, Judd Apatow.
Yeah, I mean, he's on television a lot before this. This is something where I think he's starting to try to make the jump into movies, and it kind of doesn't go super well, so he kind of goes back to television for a while. There's stuff that, I mean, he's a writer on 2 Tom Arnold stand-up specials that I didn't know about. But then he's a writer on The Ben Stiller Show, which is 92 to 93. Actually, I take that back. He's a writer on yet a 3rd Tom Arnold stand-up special. The question being, does he make Tom Arnold funny? The real accomplishment. #PP.
#PP.
He's also a writer-director on The Larry Sanders Show, which is a show I've actually been meaning to go back and check out. He's also a writer on The Critic, Freaks and Geeks, Undeclared. So, like, throughout the 90s into the 2000s, he's got a string of decent success on television. Some familiar faces from this movie actually show up in several of these projects, and are also involved with several of these projects. Then, like you said, The 40-Year-Old Virgin is definitely the film where he makes, or the movie, the thing where he makes the jump to film, and now he becomes like a big, now it's basically what he does. He just does comedy films now. Occasionally jumps back into some other stuff occasionally, but it is interesting to see that this is his first film credit. Everything to this point was basically television. He was basically writing on like The Critic at the time this was coming out, and I don't know if you guys know this, The Critic is very funny. So
very good. He was a writer. Brad Bird was a producer on that show. Obviously, there's some.
That's another one
that came over.
That's another one that I've been meaning to go back to. So definitely, like I said, been cutting his teeth on television, and this was one of his first forays into film, and obviously it didn't quite go like they were hoping.
Andrew, let's jump into it. Let's talk about this film. I know you're excited to do so, so let's do that. Everything we like, all the positives about Heavyweights. You ready?
Yep.
When preteen Jerry Garner is sent to a weight loss summer camp, he's not too thrilled about the idea. But that soon changes when the camp regulars take him under their wing and assure him that Camp Hope is an easygoing good time. What they don't know is the camp is under new management, and fitness enthusiast Tony Perkis plans to turn the camp into an infomercial by whipping the kids into shape. The campers and old staff reach their breaking point with Tony and abduct him to expose his unsavory methods. Once Camp Hope is out from his control, the campers must decide what the summer camp should actually be all about. Andrew, #PP, if there's one thing that maybe these negative reviews might be onto is that the base story here isn't super original. It's a summer camp movie, which there's been a ton of throughout the 80s and early 90s. And I remember, to me, until this rewatch, this movie occupies the same part of my brain as Bushwhacked. Speaking of Daniel Stern, that's him in that movie, right? Kids in the wilderness overthrowing a bad guy, or in a summer camp overthrowing a bad guy. Because while summer camps are a trope in and of themselves, also the idea of like an evil summer camp is like a subgenre of that. Like one of the most famous Simpson episodes is Camp Krusty, which they go to Camp Krusty and it turns out to be like a sweatshop. I mean, it's a trope we've seen again and again. So while I really enjoy this movie, I say plenty of positive things about it, there's something a little tried and true. Let's say that in the plot.
Yeah, I mean it's not reinventing the wheel, I guess is what you could say there. Although I will say this, #PP, the central conceit of this movie that a bunch of parents would send their kids to a camp that they didn't know had been sold to somebody who was going to completely that would never happen. Like it would
the staff, the camp counselors,
the counselors don't know. Nobody knows that this camp has been sold. There is zero chance that would ever happen. I was talking to my sister because my sister worked for the Girl Scouts for a great number of years, working in their summer camps when she was a teenager, and even as an adult, like overseeing some of their outdoor programs. It's something she's very passionate about. There's several Girl Scout camps up near Conroe, so she's very passionate about that. And I talked to her about that once. I was like, "That would never happen, right?" She's like, "Absolutely not." She's like, "There's no way that they would ever open themselves up to the liability of that." But we're watching the movie wrong at the same time, but. It is. I can acquiesce that there's not necessarily any new ground being broken, but I don't need there to be. If you're gonna do something that's been done before, just make sure you're doing it in a way that's funny and memorable, which I think this movie does.
Andrew, before we dive into the scenes, we're of course going to talk about the cast of this film, starting with the high point: best casting, best performance of the movie, because every episode we recognize one person who goes so far above and beyond the Call of Duty that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance, and we recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. Andrew, who gets your Mark Strong Award for heavyweights?
I feel like there's a very clear, obvious answer of who the Mark Strong to this movie belongs to, and
I would agree.
As much as my brain wants to go somewhere else, I know I can't. I know in my heart of hearts I can't justify it. It's Ben Stiller as Tony Perkis, as the Mark Strong of this movie. There is zero question that he has thrown himself completely 100% into playing Tony Perkis, and it's also very odd to see Ben Stiller kind of, I don't know, there's something weird about seeing him in like a prominent role in like 95, because like I don't know that he was particularly famous yet. Obviously the Ben Stiller show had already been out there.
And this is a year after Reality Bites, which he writes and directs, and it's kind of a indie critic darling, not a huge thing. But Andrew, he's not even on the poster for this movie.
He's not.
Isn't that wild?
It is. It's pretty crazy. And I mean, he'd had, like I said, small roles for a while there, and a bunch of different things. Had obviously been doing some television stuff, was on television. He was on a couple episodes of SNL, gets the Ben Stiller show, which is, it's odd to me that it kind of exists at all, the Ben Stiller show, because it's this weird, like it mostly airs at the end of 92 and into 93, and then there's like a last episode that didn't air until like 95. But it was a very weird thing that the Ben Stiller show even exists. But even that one was like, it was him, Judd Apatow was on it, Bob Odenkirk, David Cross, a whole lot of people. It's weird looking at a lot of this old comedy stuff, and you can just see all these interweaving people just all were working together and cutting their teeth at the same time. But yeah, so Reality Bites is a year before this, which I'm guessing when this was made really hadn't turned him into a name yet. So it's kind of wild that he's basically here, but it's before he's really Ben Stiller. And like you said, he's not on the poster, but he is and the joke everyone obviously makes is that Tony Perkis is the prototype of White Goodman.
Yes.
The joke obviously being that the characters are very similar, but he's just given this to everything. Every single dumb nuance of the character, like there's the way he kind of dives back and forth between being like the PR face versus the general like miserable, angry person he actually is, the weird trauma that's buried in the character, all this stuff that's going on there. All of it works. He's so good at doing all the different pieces that he needs to do for this character, and it's fantastic. And that hair, I mean,
beautiful,
the hair, Chris,
gorgeous.
The hair, Chris, the hair. You can't ignore it. This is the movie I wish everybody, like every interview with Ben Stiller, I wish people asked him about heavyweights, because nobody ever does.
I've heard, the comparisons. This character is just like White Goodman. It's maybe the same character. White Goodman being his character from Dodgeball.
Yes.
And I saw this movie plenty of times as a kid. I haven't revisited it. I get the feeling that you've gone back to this movie more often than I have.
I watch this movie like 4 times a year, like easily. Like quarterly. It's all beautiful. The
time. But in my head, I was like, yeah, I mean, he's like a fitness guy. I remember that. But like you go back and watch and like the look, the tight clothes, obsessed with fitness, used to be overweight, is insulting to the people he's trying to whip into shape. I mean, so many parallels.
There's a lot of crossover.
The dramatic voice that he puts on, like it's basically a 1-for-1. I was thinking about it. The one real big difference I can think of is that White Goodman is also dumb. Part of that character is that he's an idiot, and Tony Perkis isn't really an idiot. Like White Goodman can't spell his own name. Tony Perkis seems intelligent enough. Like there's no jokes about him just being dumb or absent-minded. Basically, that's like the one degree. And I also like that part of Tony Perkis is that he's like a Nepo baby. There's a running joke that his dad is bankrolling all of his dumb business ideas, and if one fails, he just starts another one. And Ben Stiller's in this movie with his dad, Jerry Stiller. And obviously Ben Stiller also benefited from having a famous comedic dad. So I feel like they're kind of maybe taking the piss a little bit by
his mom's here too.
This character, Ben Stiller's mom, is that who that is? Is that
the couple that owns the camp is Jerry Stiller and Ann Mira, and those are his parents.
I don't think I ever knew that was his mom.
Like his mom is one of the protesters at the beginning of Zoolander 2, but Zoolander as well, not.
I was gonna say I haven't seen Zoolander 2, so I don't know the reference.
No, there's they're on the red carpet at the beginning of Zoolander. She's one of the protesters that comes up to him. But yeah, so both of his parents are. I've always loved that about like one of the fun little quirks of the movie is that his actual parents play the owners of the camp before he buys it, and then Ben Stiller plays his own father in this movie later.
My note was that Ben Stiller had to play this character because they already used Jerry Stiller. They already cast him as someone else. I like the idea of like they wrote or shot this in order, and that day came like, oh crap, we can't use Jerry. Put on some old man makeup.
Put on some old man makeup,
dude.
Talk with a super thick accent.
His little performance as Tony Perkis. It's so. In comparison to Tony Perkis Jr., it's such a subtle performance, but it's hilarious. And I gotta say, Ben Stiller, alum of the show, we talked about him in Mystery Men, maybe even gave him a Mark Strong Award. I don't know. There's no way to check. He might be a multi-time Mark Strong Award winner. If I haven't said it already, by the way, heavyweights, he's also getting my Mark Strong Award. But I think he's underrated in a way. Like, I think late 90s, early 2000s, he gets on this run where he does so many like kind of straight man characters, kind of subdued characters, like Something About Mary, Along Came Polly, things like that, almost rom-com.
Meet the Parents,
Meet the Parents, like exactly. That like the wackiness is kind of stuff around him until like he inevitably like breaks or loses his cool in those movies. But we get so used to that, to see him go like so over the top with something like this, or Dodgeball, or even Tropic Thunder. I don't know, like we almost take him for granted at some point. So he's so good at this over the top, silly, goofy stuff. And my last note, before we got to talk about other people, my last note is the dude is fit. The dude looks great.
Yeah,
like you can't fake wearing those skin tight suits.
even like something like Tropic Thunder, which is a full decade after this, just like this dude got cut for Tropic Thunder. Like I agree generally with Ben Stiller. I feel like Ben Stiller is kind of weird where like I feel like there is this kind of group that just like I take it for granted seems like the wrong way to put it, but just like he's just kind of there. Like Ben Stiller is that constant throughout your life that you don't realize has been there the whole time supporting you from afar. But like I've sung the praises of The Secret Life of Walter Mitty before many times, and that's like something that he directs and something that he I don't think he writes that one. No, but he does produce it and star in it. But like it also is lost to me like Ben Stiller used to be like a comedy writer. Like when he was on the Ben Stiller show, he was a writer. When he was doing SNL stuff, it was as a writer. And then he has like very, very limited writing credits throughout his career. Stuff like he has an uncredited rewrite on Reality Bites. He's got an uncredited rewrite on The Cable Guy, and then he is credited on Zoolander, Tropic Thunder, Zoolander 2, and like that's kind of it. He kind of doesn't do a whole lot of writing. And I just think that's interesting because it's kind of how he cut his teeth was being a writer. And then it's like he kind of got to the point where he didn't have to do that anymore. And he was like, good. But at the
like
same
Ben
time.
Affleck and Matt Damon
like
writing Good Will Hunting. And then they kind of just transition off to...
yeah, and like he's also sort of in the... like he pops in and out of the Adam Sandler circle occasionally. He shows up once in a while. But yeah, I've always been a big fan. Like stuff like obviously Heavyweights, but even like Mystery Men, Zoolander, Meet the Parents. Those were movies that were on like all the time when I was a kid. So I've always really liked Ben Stiller. I know there's a lot of people who think that probably the opposite of us, think that he's overrated or think that he's not that great. And I'm just saying that maybe you need to look inside yourself. But it's great. And as Tony Perkis, he is nailing it. Like every dumb thing that he does, every weird quirk the character has, all of it is perfect. The way he delivers the lines with such disdain, like when he's like, lunch has been canceled due to lack of hustle, like stuff like that. Like it's just it's so good. He's just so unbelievably good at delivering these lines in a way that makes it all perfect. He is the perfect villain for this movie.
One last note: I share a birthday with Ben Stiller, and he's my go-to celebrity birthday. I don't know, that's probably a term for this, but we share a birthday, and I think it's a lot of fun. Andrew, let's talk about some more adults in this film before we start talking about the campers. Like Tom McGowan, who plays Pat Finley. He's a counselor at Can't Hope, also the bus driver, so he's like the first kind of camp leader that we meet in this movie, and he's just delightful.
Yeah,
I love this. He's so warm and gentle, real John Candy energy. It reminds me a lot of I don't have his name off the top of my head, but Blank Check, like the limo driver there, you know.
Yeah.
Just a nice warm face that can like relate to the kids without talking down to them or being belittling or being hey buddy, just kind of joking around with them on like an even playing field, making kids feel important. He's very good at that, and this is a super sweet performance. If Ben Stiller wasn't doing what Ben Stiller's doing, might be where I go for the Mark Strong Award, because I think it's not an easy thing to do to kind of get that caring, genuine mentorship across, and I think he does an excellent job.
I like the way they approach the character in that he he comes off like somebody who's been at this camp his entire life, and it means everything to him, and obviously the kids being taken care of means everything to him. And the distress he feels when he thinks they're going to be treated poorly by Tony, it's all very real, and it comes across as completely genuine. This is a real like Gus Zielinski type energy, just a guy who really wants to do the right thing, really just wants to help out, and doesn't come off condescending doing it. It's a very, very good performance. Tom McGowan, probably more like a television guy. That's probably where you probably know him from more. He was on the guest starred on pretty much every single TV show there was in the 90s. I thought there was one he was on for a good amount of time. He does show up on Frasier a really long time, a good chunk, and he shows up on Everybody Loves Raymond a lot. I thought he was on King of Queens, but maybe I'm just imagining that. I must be. But he's just wonderful in this movie. Like you said, he plays this character with the exact balance of like empathizing with them, but still wanting to be like an authority figure, and then that kind of culminates in him getting put in charge of the camp at the end of the movie, which is just the perfect arc for that character. He's been there his whole life. Where does he go? He runs the place.
And there's another camp counselor that is a regular at this camp. This one gets picked on because he did actually lose weight, so now all the overweight kids like to give him a hard time. It's the counselor's name is Tim, and he's played by Paul Feig. I didn't realize until I was researching to start recording. I watched this whole movie. Is that Paul
Feig?
Yes, that guy. It's the guy that directed Bridesmaids and Spy, which we always say, go watch Spy if you haven't already. Yes, Ghostbusters 2016. You and I covered it on this podcast. We're both big fans. Big fan of this guy's work. But, yeah, it's weird because, like, he's obviously an actor here. Judd Apatow is just a co-writer, but like they remain linked throughout their entire careers. But yeah, I think he does a wonderful job. Still given that energy of like genuinely caring for these kids. And this movie has a lot of heart, like genuine heart, and it's not from sappy writing. It's from real heartfelt performances, especially by these two gentlemen, these counselors. But Paul Feig, really good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, he's Freaks and Geeks was a big thing that Paul Feig, he was a creator and producer on that. He also wrote a whole bunch of them with Judd Apatow. I don't know if that's how he ends up in working with them on this film, but Paul Feig is another guy who kind of cut his teeth on television, directed episodes of Arrested Development, directed episodes of Weeds, directed episodes of The Office, kind of was all over the place doing television stuff, occasionally dives back into that. He's fantastic. And it was wild to me when I made the discovery that Tim, the counselor from this, was like directing movies like Bridesmaids and Spy. I was like, Paul Feig. I was like, it's another thing where I was like, why do I know that name? Like I've heard this name before. And then suddenly you figure it out and you're like, whoa, man, that's nuts. So it's cool. Like I said, he's a little bit more manic than Pat is. Obviously, Tom McGowan is Pat, but he's kind of playing off of that a little bit, whereas Pat's kind of the straight man. Tim kind of gets to be a little bit more unhinged. Like he's a lot more outwardly pissed at the situation. He's making a lot more comments. And then when he starts dancing, he looks like he's having a seizure. So
dude,
it is.
Since you brought it up, I was bringing it up later. I want to see a side-by-side of his dancing and Crispin Glover in Friday the 13th. I think he might be doing the same moves. I think he might be referencing Crispin Glover's dance.
Just the deep cuts. Paul Feig, only the sickest of references.
I'm gonna put this together. We're
gonna figure it out.
Crack this wide open.
But yeah, otherwise Paul Feig is great here. I mean, he's obviously, it's a little bit more less screen time. Those are the words you're looking for, Andrew. Congratulations.
There you go.
But he's still making the most of it. He's making himself a memorable character. I like at the beginning of the film when all the guys are teasing him and he starts showing off his butt, and then like the nurse walks by and he has to like quickly pivot and pretend he's talking about
bald eagles.
It's like, look at these quick little buttons of steel, and up there is an American bald eagle. It's like just smooth, flawless, perfect. But yeah, he's great. Doing a great job here.
Andrew, since you brought up the new nurse, I want to round out our good guy crew here with Leah Lale, who plays Julie Belcher, Camp Hope's new nurse, and she catches the eye of our original counselors, but mainly Pat, who is a bit tongue-tied around her, but she's just, again, it might sound like a broken record, but another sweet, caring performance. Seems to genuinely care about these kids. It's very nice and sweet. She's one that was outspoken against Tony from the very beginning, and looking at her career, she's got a few bit parts in different comedies here and there. She comes back in Little Nicky, and then Wikipedia's telling me that she is retired from acting and is now working in real estate. I always get a kick out of people getting a second career after acting and then just imagining the stories they must have and get to tell their clients. Yeah. It's a fun thing, but just real sweet performance here.
Yeah, she acts through about 2005, 6, doing a lot of television stuff again. She also showed up on the Larry Sanders Show. She showed up in some episodes of Seinfeld. It is all roads lead to the Larry Sanders Show. Apparently, that's where like the center nexus of the universe and pop culture apparently is the Larry Sanders Show. But she also has a very, very small part in Mighty Ducks 2, where she is like a waitress at a party, and they just ask her like what her dream is, and but yeah, she like genuinely has this empathy, like not just towards the campers, but also towards like Pat. She can see how upsetting all of this is for Pat as well. The Pat see this kind of camp that he's cared so much about kind of taken over and turned into this thing by Tony Perkis. And so the empathy she shows to everybody comes off extremely well. And it's interesting to me to see people say that like the movie doesn't do anything with its premise, when even if the only thing the movie does is show how important it is to have a positive support network, no matter what it is, that's still a pretty important message to have, because no matter what you're doing in your life, a supportive, empathetic support structure is an important thing to have, and it can sometimes be the make or break for some stuff. And having just even these three be that support for these kids, it's a big deal.
Tom Hodges plays Lars.
Oh, man.
Basically the right-hand man for Tony Perkis. He's much more hands-on with the kids as far as being strict and mean and exacting and putting them through the paces. He also has the hots for the new nurse and is consistently hitting on her. And as Wikipedia says, he is a foreign counselor who works for Tony. He's got a strong accent. I thought it was maybe Swedish, but I guess the movie doesn't say where it's from. But he's got a distinct accent, which is defining for this character.
I assumed a Scandinavian thing of some sort. Yeah, so this was the runner-up for the Mark Strong for me. I love everything Tom Hodges is doing as Lars. I think he is genuinely hilarious as a character, just the contrast he has and the ridiculous nature of it from his first introduction, because he's Tony's guy, so he's very he's just all on Tony's side, but then like he has these interactions where he just comes off so goofy and ridiculous sometimes. Like I will like the swimming scene lives in my head rent free all the time, where she's like, shouldn't you be watching the kids? And he's like, it's fine, I've got them on the body system. And she's like, the body system? And he just blows his whistle and screams out, buddy! And they all go, buddy. And you realize, oh, he just can't say buddy. He just says buddy as body instead. It's just that sort of stuff all with the character. All the way to the end when he kind of ends up on the camper's sides, like even just like the deadpan, like when he's dressed as Andy Warhol during this weird hall of knowledge, and at one point he's asking them to name the paintings, and the kid just goes, share, and he just looks and goes, no. Like just even the way he delivers that is just perfect. He's a great character. This is a genuinely, I think, very, very funny performance. And I was just kind of shocked to look at his stuff and like not a whole lot in his filmography. Like a lot of like guest spots on television, but nothing really in a long time. It looks like around 2000 he kind of stopped acting for a while and then did a few bit things in the late aughts, early 2010s, but overall doesn't really do a whole lot. As probably his biggest thing was he was in 30 episodes of The Hogan Family, which was one of those weird 80s sitcoms that somehow ran for many, many seasons that you never heard about. But otherwise, not a whole lot going on there. It's in Steel Magnolias, I guess.
I agree. His character's a lot of fun. My favorite thing is he's like the first night there, he explains that he has a severely deviated septum, and he makes quite a disturbing noise when he sleeps. But don't be alarmed. I'm okay. And then you hear this just gnarly
horrendous snoring, just the worst. Yeah.
Andrew, I'm agreeing with everything you're saying. This is a super fun performance. It's baffling to me that he is on the cover of this movie, or the poster, I should say. So the poster is 4 of the campers holding up a giant sub sandwich. And if you look at the poster, the second kid from the left, like one of his hands doesn't even touch the sandwich. It's so poorly done.
But it's terrible. Like even Kenan Thompson, you don't even see his second hand. It's just awful.
But in the giant hoagie sandwich is Lars, which I honestly didn't recognize. I had to text you. I'm like, who is this? Because he has like black hair for some reason, but he doesn't have black hair in the movie. But why is that not Ben Stiller? Not only because Ben Stiller's arguably a bigger name, even if at the time he's not huge, he's the main villain. Why aren't they throwing the main villain in this hoagie sandwich? I'm so
I wonder if you have
to
pay. I wonder if you have to pay more. Like if you put his likeness on the poster, is it more? And they were trying to just cut all the costs at this point. I don't know.
Well, whoever you put on there, you got to pay him. I guess.
I assume I assume the royalties for Tom Hodges are a lot less than Ben Stiller. But that's my only guess. It's my only guess. I have no idea. I have no idea. It is an odd choice. But it also, again, it may just literally just be that they just threw the cheapest person in the sandwich because they didn't think anybody was they didn't think Ben Stiller was going to be a big sell of it either. But I don't know. It's pretty wild though. But everything I like Lars. There's so many lines of Lars in my head. Like when you can kind of tell that it's a little interesting because there are moments in the movie where you can tell that like Tony is planning and plotting things that even Lars doesn't really know about. Like the dance is a great example where like Lars is the DJ and he's like genuinely playing songs and he's genuinely kind of dancing. Fun. And when like everybody kind of starts getting into it, like he's into it too. He's having a good time. And then all of a sudden Tony comes in and blows the whole thing apart. And then he like snaps back in and he's like, oh, nope, this is what we're doing. But like, so you get a few hints throughout the movie that maybe there's a little bit more to Lars than we thought. And it's fun.
Andrew, before we talk about the campers, I want to talk about one more adult character who I probably wouldn't be mentioning except he's played by alum of the show from Fant Forstick. Maybe even one of Mark Strong award there. I don't know. Tim Blake Nelson plays Roger Johnson. I'm surprised this character even has a last name. When Jerry comes home from school on his last day, Roger is there in the living room with his parents, and he shows them the video for Camp Hope. He's like a recruiter for this camp. And he's giving you kind of like bad vibes, like this isn't a great place, which is weird because at the time, Camp Hope still is a good place, unless he's hired by Tony Perkis. Maybe that's the idea. He's already on the new management team, and that's why he seems so nefarious. I don't know. Tim Blake Nelson's pretty funny, though, and he's a great character actor. He's been in a million things. I think he's extremely talented. And when I saw him pop up, I was like, oh, I guess I forgot he was in this movie. And then after that scene, you never see him again.
He's gone. The rest of it, he doesn't come back. Yeah, it's wild. This is 95. He's not really anybody yet. I think, obviously, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou might be the thing that kind of makes him a little bit more high profile. But yeah, I've always this is another movie where I go back and I look at it, I was like, man, there are a lot of people buried in this movie. And there's 2 more I do want to mention if you don't mind. Just quick little shout outs.
Sure, mostly.
Yeah. One is Kenny the cameraman, played by Adam
Covert.
Sandler, alum of the universe, Alan Covert, just showing up briefly as this kind of spurned guy who's filming this infomercial that Tony Perkis is doing. Before you find out that Tony Perkis hasn't really been paying him any money. So he ends up just handing all of his footage over to them so that they can help expose him and kind of move on with everything. But I just thought that, just again, this is, he was another guy who was on the Ben Stiller show and then eventually just kind of eventually got into that Adam Sandler, Happy Gilmore, I guess, is the year after this.
I gotta admit, I did not recognize him. I thought that he was Judd Apatow. He looks like Judd Apatow in this movie.
Apparently, Judd Apatow is in in this movie. I don't remember as who, though.
Homer is this character's name. I don't know who that is. Maybe he's like a parent you see for a quick second. Yeah. But Alan Covert is very funny in this role, and he's always the standout in Adam Sandler movies too. He's in Big Daddy. He's one of his friends. You mentioned Happy Gilmore. He's this caddy. He's always he's got a few memorable lines in like every Adam Sandler movie. And I'll say it again. Great job. Great work if you can get it.
Yeah, I will not be the one to suggest that they do not deserve the money they have made. And the other one, this one is just very odd to me. So Alan Covert, like I said, obviously, and even Airheads, I think, is the year before this, which he's in with Adam Sandler. So I'm guessing that's actually where that all begins. But the other one is The Cook. You only see him like one scene, maybe two.
And he has like his head down?
It's like he's got like a bandana on or something, and like you can see his face that he's talking, but like he's played by Peter Berg. And yeah. I just thought that was so strange. Now, like, Peter Berg is like, I guess he still acts occasionally, but like he also like got into directing and like directed things like Lone Survivor, Deepwater Horizon, Patriots Day, Mile 22. He's a writer on The Losers, one with the show, I guess. He directs the Battleship movie, like weird stuff, but is also notably the writer and director of Friday Night Lights, which is probably the big thing that he's probably, if he's known for anything, he's probably known for that. But I just was watching it through. It kind of reminds me of the cook in Wet Hot American Summer being played by Elliot Stabler. Yes. Just like a weird small part where you're just kind of like, wait, what? Who? Why are you here doing this? But yeah, it's just
crazy.
A fun little thing.
You look at the cast between Ben's. How many directors you have acting? Ben Stiller, Paul Feig, Peter Berg, and Judd Apatow all appear as acting roles, and they all go on to have massive directing careers.
Meanwhile, the guy who directs this doesn't show up anywhere, which you kind of thought that he would. But yeah, David Bowe also appears as Chris Donnelly. He's the leader of the camp MVP or whatever they are, and I just remember him from UHF, and it's always fun to see him, even if he's a jerk.
There's so many kids in this movie. We won't go through them one by one. We got to get to scenes, but of course, got to shout out first and foremost Aaron Schwartz, who plays Jerry Garner, our main kid. This is his first year there, so he's kind of our audience surrogate as he learns about the camp. So do we, the audience, and plays it pretty straightforward. A lot of these kids we're going to go through have like a quirk about them or their niche. But he's kind of just the white meat babyface thrown into the situation, and he has to do the more dramatic, heavy lifting type stuff. And his relationship with Pat, I think, is very sweet. They almost have like you would expect that like Jerry's dad had passed away. He grew up without a dad, and Pat is like his first father figure. They kind of bond in that way, even though Jerry has a dad, but he's played by a horrible person. So maybe he is like a horrible dad and he needed desperately a father figure. But I think he does an excellent job for sure. And the first of many Mighty Ducks alum that show up in this movie.
The first, at least three. But no, I think you're actually correct. Well, and I think there's an interesting story with Jerry. He did not want to go to this camp. He understood what it was. He really didn't like the implication of what his parents were telling him, that there was something wrong with him that needed to get fixed. And so he was very skeptical going to the camp. Then he meets guys like Josh and whoever Kenan Thompson's character's name is. Roy. There it is. And kind of gets this idea that, oh, well, maybe this ain't going to be so bad. And then when he gets there, boom, it's Tony Perkis. And it's this whole Perkisizing thing. And even the alums of the camp are just kind of like, this ain't it, man. This isn't what it was supposed to be. And so there's this weird struggle that he's going through where like he's trying to tell his dad that this is not what it was supposed to be, that he doesn't understand. And his dad's just super dismissive. So Pat becomes this kind of stand-in father figure for almost all of these guys, because they eventually do find out that like, not just the parents, they're not getting any of the letters. The Tony's just hoarding all the letters and not sending them out, so they can't even contact their families. So Pat is kind of standing in as a kind of, like I said, a surrogate father for almost all of these characters. And but they do focus heavily on the Pat Jerry relationship. They have several scenes that are just them that show them bonding and showing Pat trying to kind of just get Jerry to realize that this place used to not be like this. This place used to be somewhere that you loved to go. And again, by the end of the film, I think he's able to kind of embrace that and bring it all around. But Aaron Schwartz is doing a good job kind of playing that standing character. Like I said, there's a lot of, he gets kind of the most to dig into emotionally, and I think he does a good job with it.
And I mean, you already mentioned the other two campers I want to talk about. The goalies, as it were. Kenan Thompson as Roy. At this point, still very early in his career, but has plenty of work under his belt.
Only briefly a goalie.
But a goalie nonetheless, Andrew. From the Mighty Ducks franchise. Then it's shortly after this, I believe, I don't know if his filmography pulled up, that he is on All That and Nickelodeon. And
I think All That's already on. I think All That starts in 94.
God, was he this young at the beginning of All That?
He was.
It's crazy. Kenan Thompson is fantastic, and someone that I feel like may, or just doesn't get the flowers that he deserves. He's, for one, even from an early age, is very good at this acting thing. He's so natural. He doesn't feel like good acting for a kid. He doesn't feel like he's just being himself. Like, he's acting. He's playing a character, and he does it effortlessly. Oh boy. Effortlessly. More effortlessly than I just said the word effortlessly. He's fantastic on like All That, Kenan and Kel, and those are things that like I go back to as an adult, and I'm like, okay, this is clearly in for kids, but he is very good. And of course, now he's the longest running cast member of SNL, and I know people will. I say he doesn't get his flowers. He's not like anybody's. I shouldn't say anybody. He's not a lot of people's favorite cast member. He maybe doesn't have like the big characters that you know, but he's such a good utility player, and that's so important. I'm thinking like, okay, like the Beavis and Butthead sketch that went viral recently, which everybody talks about Ryan Gosling as Beavis, which is hilarious. But you need Kenan Thompson there to play off of and to give those looks, and he does. My favorite thing that he does on SNL or any of his work, where he does this look. I don't know. This is a podcast. I'm going to describe it. But he just squints his eyes.
Yeah.
He just looks at somebody and goes, I just performed it for you. I die laughing every time. It's one of my favorite reaction gifs. Is just a close-up of his face, and he does that squinty eye
Perfect.
thing.
Yep.
It's so good. You think of like the Black Jeopardy sketches, whether it's Tom Hanks or Chadwick Boseman, some of the best sketches they've done in the past 10 years. He's there as the host. He's the glue of that of those sketches. He's like this generation's Phil Hartman on SNL in that way, who again was never like the guy in sketches, but was always there as kind of the glue of the show. And everyone that's ever worked with him, all the cast members, sing their praises and love the guy. So just want to make sure I give the guy his flowers, because he's always like the other guy in a sketch or a movie. But it takes a lot of talent to have a 30-plus year career now playing that type of role.
Yeah, and it speaks to also like the faith that like obviously somebody like Lorne Michaels must have in him to have him be around, because like there's a lot of people who like reach a certain point, and SNL was kind of like, all right, bye, but he's still there, he's still doing his thing, and I think that speaks to what they think of him as a performer and what he brings to the show. So obviously been doing sketch comedy a very long time. He did also just reprise his role as Pierre Escargot from All That in honor of the Paris Olympics, which was a very
didn't see that.
A very healing thing for us millennials that remember the character. Where the only joke of the character, admittedly, is that he can't actually speak French, but
and he goes ho ho ho
ho. But anyway,
Andrew, one day we're gonna. I feel like the French are the last ones we've come around on to be like, we should maybe be more culturally sensitive, like Asian countries and representation for African Americans. Like we've come to terms with all these, but I feel like the French. My son, he's 3. He watches Paw Patrol, and there's a French character who just wears a beret, has a mustache, and his name is Francois. And there's just no effort put into characterizing this guy other than he's French, and doesn't he talk funny, which was all Pierre Escargot was. But no one's really like taken a second look at that yet. Like it's kind of a joke unto itself with how
Hey,
America treats
if
the French. But
if France doesn't back the revolution in America, guys, there's no United States. So show some respect. But yeah. Anyway, Kenan Thompson is great. He's a great character here. He's the first camper that Jerry meets outside of it. I love their first interaction where he's like, you going to fat camp? And he's like, no. Why you say that? And he's like, because you're fat. Like, he just very bluntly, no question, just dives right into it.
And Jerry's like, so are you. He's like, I know. I'm going to fat camp.
That's why I'm going to fat camp. And it's like, checkmate. I have no response to this, but it's wonderful.
And Sean Weiss plays the character of Josh. He's definitely like the comedian of the group, and also from Mighty Ducks, plays Goldberg over there, our other goalie. And he's fantastic, genuinely pretty funny kid. He now does stand up, which makes total sense, given his characters in these two franchises. And seemed to have some personal demons that he has since overcome, so good for him. But he is someone that I look at his picture now, I don't recognize him. That is hard. I never would have guessed if it wasn't, you didn't have his name under his picture, that's what he looks like now. Unlike Kenan Thompson and most of these other like child actors, dude's really gone through a transformation, but seems to be doing good. And like I said, stand-up comedy seems like a great fit for this kid. He definitely has a knack for it, it would seem.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he ran into some substance issues in the late 2010s, ran into some trouble, but as of, I think, January of last year, he'd been 3 years sober, trying to turn himself around, get things going. Does have a website where you can buy autographed hockey jerseys from him if you want. All sorts of
Andrew,
fun stuff.
Will you be buying an autographed hockey jersey from Sean Weiss?
I have Mighty Ducks jerseys already. Okay. I do not need more of them. And also, I don't know. We all know it's going to happen eventually. But but yeah. So it's a good, overcoming your kind of personal issues. He's done that a lot. But yeah, he's another one that went on to be in. He's actually maybe the one I'm remembering from King of Queens, but was also on Freaks and Geeks for a few episodes. Was featured on that show. And obviously, I remember him very heavily from here. And I think he's perfect. He's basically he's clearly the one that's trying to be the most outwardly funny. They give the character a lot of weird quirks, like he shaves for no reason already.
Not for no reason.
Not
Andrew.
for no
that
reason.
Pays off in the end.
It does pay back. It does pay off. But they have him shaving. It's interesting to me that he gets thrown out of the camp and then argues his way back in. Like, why would you come back to the situation after you already got out? Then again, maybe he's just a giant bro that doesn't want to leave his friends behind, in which case, good for him.
That's cool.
But yeah, he does a great job here. I love the clip where Tony Perkis is trying to get him to say, I love the food, but he can't. He's like, it's in the video they show at the Parents' Day, and he's just like, just say I love the food. I love the food. It's like, hey, Josh, I love the food. Wait till I finish the question. You just keep watching Tony's just unhinged response more and more as it happens. And he plays off it well.
Andrew, well, it's a deep cast. So there's more. We'll talk about him in scenes, but we got to do just that. We got to jump to the scenes of this film. And you know what we're going to do. We're going to start with our favorite scene of the movie. All positives here. Andrew, in your opinion, when is this film firing on all cylinders? What's the best scene in Heavyweights?
Man, I can't tell you how difficult a decision this actually is for me, because I love so much of this movie. I feel like my favorite scene is kind of the final downfall of Tony Perkis, I guess, where like the showing the campers,
it sounds
campers
so
are shown
serious.
It does. Like they're showing the parents all of Tony's hijinks and his abuse and his, all the PTSD I'm sure he's giving so many of these kids. And the parents are shocked. They're all basically like, why didn't you tell us? And the kids are like, I don't mean to be rude, but we did tell you. And I guess I get why you'd just be like, your kid's complaining about being at camp and the food's bad and everything. You're just, as a parent, you're just kind of like, yeah, sure. Why not? Of course it is. Like, that's what it is. But So this leads to Tony breaking free of this prison they've literally put him in, to kind of interrupt this kind of presentation, and he kind of I love that he like flips down from the ceiling and lands on the ground, and he just gets back up and goes, "Ouch." Like, and I'm not gonna lie, that's a tick that like I didn't realize that I'd like worked into my own, like literally almost any time I do anything. Like I play
Anytime
hockey.
you do a few flips and land on your feet, you say ouch.
Like, well, I'll play hockey, and then like we'll finish a game, and I'll go sit back in the locker room, and like I sit down and immediately go, "Ouch!" Like it's like it's just hardwired into my brain that like after I do anything strenuous, it's followed by "Ouch." And then he does this big show where like Tony is like smashing all this glass on the ground, and he's walking across it, trying to establish dominance, and the character's just completely unhinged at this point. And to be fair, he has been held in a weird dirt prison in the back of a barn for the last how many days, whoever knows. But which sounds really weird out of context for a summer camp movie when you say it. But ultimately, Tony tries to stand up. Jerry's dad comes in, punches him, and then Ben Stiller, in an ultimate act of self-defeat, backflips back down the aisle he came down, where all the glass is now magically gone, and then just crashes into the ground, like just
self-destruct,
just beefs it into the wall, and that's it. Like there's no more needed. And then after this is when Tony Perkis Sr. comes in, and again you mentioned that's just a really fun performance by Ben Stiller as well. But this is kind of just the peak of Ben Stiller in this movie. Just it's when he's at his full, most unhinged. And then ultimately he defeats himself, basically. Like he takes himself out, and it's just I love this scene. I love the build up to it, where like the parents are all seeing what's happening. I love the embellishments they put in the video, where they make it look like the kids are eating a rat or something. Just weird, dumb crap that they're doing, and it's just a blast. And then ultimately, just again, the cream of the crop is the full self-destruction of Tony Perkis as he does all these giant acrobatic moves that he's clearly not physically well enough to do, and it results in him basically taking himself out, which is hilarious.
Yeah, Andrew, great pick. I mean, I'm going very similar. I also had a hard time really narrowing down what my favorite is. I enjoy so many scenes of this movie, but I wanted to go with basically the beginning of Tony's downfall. You're kind of going with a conclusion. I wanted to highlight the first scene where he really snaps and loses it. This is after the kids and the original staff have already talked and decided this guy has to be taken down, but they haven't come up with the plan yet. Well, Tony takes the kids out on a hike, and the kids take it into their own hands to dispatch of them. But before that happens, Tony really snaps. And there's this scene where they're at the edge of a cliff, and Tony is like, "You want to get crazy?" And he jumps onto this branch that is overhanging the cliff, and like a gymnast, like spins around it and then pulls himself up on top. And it's very clear what they're doing here, like with a stunt double, and then he punch in for Ben Stiller to be, perched up here. And he's talking to these kids from the branch, trying to get them to do it. And they're like, "This guy is crazy." My favorite shot here, though, is you have a shot of the kids talking to him, and then before we hit the reverse shot to see Ben Stiller, we're still focused on the kids. There's a sound effect of woo, woo, woo. And then you cut to Ben Stiller, and he lands in frame, implying that he did like a triple flip dismount. And we just don't see it. You just hear that sound, and you know what's happening, and you see him land. It's so great. It's like the badger fight from Ernest Goes to Camp, where you never see the badger. It's just very clever. It's all in they're putting the image in your mind with sound effects, which I thought was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But he's finally lost it. They do a PE classic here, Andrew. We used to call it the atomic sit-up. They set it up by saying, hey, he doesn't think that it's possible to do a sit-up if you can't see or hear anything. And he's like, well, I'm happy to put this misconception to rest. He lays down, they put a bandana over his eyes and hold it, and they say, sit up on the count of 3. Josh has dropped his pants. He's gonna sit up and see Josh's butt. Now, as I said, I know this trick from being a kid, but I always knew the concept of it. I never saw someone fall for it or, tried to do it to anybody. It's just like a prank that you're aware of. But the idea is your face like goes into their butt crack, like their bare butt. And so I'm watching it, and Tony sits up and he stops just short of it. And then like he takes Josh out at the knees. And part of me was like, why didn't they go all the way and like embarrass him? And then I realized it'd be an image of Ben Stiller pitting his face into a naked 13-year-old's butt. And it's like, okay, maybe that would have been too far.
Yeah. Can't quite go that far.
Maybe it's smart to stop short there. But because of that, he chases Josh. He lures him to a trap they have set. They have a giant pit dug out covered with sticks that break when he steps on it. And he falls into the pit. And they have captured him. And this movie's just really, ramping up a notch before the finale. I love how they present, they go back to the camp counselors and like, oh, we already took care of it. And that's where they show Ben Stiller in his prison, where at first the counselors are like, are you insane? This is where people get the chair for this, I think is what Paul Feig says. And then Pat tries to help him out. He takes the duct tape off. He's like, oh, I'm so sorry. But then Ben Stiller insults Pat. He puts the duct tape back on, and now everybody's on board. We've got to capture this guy. We've got to expose him and move right along into your favorite scene, Andrew. So altogether, the downfall of Tony Perkis, I think we're just agreeing in general. Ben Stiller finally snapping, finally losing it, is wonderful. And it's really highlighted when they finish showing the video and Tony Perkis is up in the balcony watching. He does a sarcastic clapping and he praises the film's cinematography, but he says the villain was a bit over the top.
Yeah.
It's great. Finally snapping, finally losing it. It's just a joy to watch. And my favorite part of this movie.
Yeah, I have friends that think that the movie kind of goes off the rails kind of the moment they like kidnap Tony. They think it kind of escalates into something very different. But the degeneration of Tony Perkis is just so fun to watch for me that I can't be too upset about it. Even though it is kind of a wild tone shift as far as movies like this go, to being like, what do we do? Oh yeah, we kidnap him and hold him prisoner. Like, oh, that's where we're going with this. Okay. A
little bit. I think the video kind of saves it. The fact that the plan is like to show the parents the truth and then the authorities kind of finish it off makes it a little more digestible. But
yeah, I think so.
A makeshift electrified prison is a little a little over the top.
Yeah, but because nothing else in this movie is over the top at all. None of the rest of it is even remotely crazy. But yeah, and then but and then, like I said, the performance of Tony Perkis Sr., where he's been, and you can tell, like, Tony Perkis Sr. is done with Tony Perkis Jr. Like this, he's a man who has no more patience for what this kid has done. He's tired of hearing about it, doesn't want to hear about it anymore, but knows that it's going to keep happening. And it's very, very just a brief one scene, but
I just love how dismissive he is. He's like, "Well, someone's got to be in charge. Who's been here the longest? Okay, well, hey, 6:00. I got a thing to get to."
Yeah, I'd love to hang about, but I got a thing. I love when he's like, "Well, Mr. Perkis, please," and he goes, "Please, Papa." Like asks that the kids call him Papa. It's like Papa, and he's like, I just got to put a name on the forms for the insurance. Who's been here the longest? And I love when Pat's like 18 years, and he looks at her, he's like, 18 years? My God, what have you been doing with yourself? Like, just like shocked that he could be at the camp for 18 years and still look like that. But it's just a great, like I said, it's like one scene and it's just perfect. It's 100% great. He just puts on this like weird, I don't know if that's like an Appalachian accent. I don't know if it's like a weird New York accent. But it's perfect. And you just see Tony, like, he gets in the car and then like rolls down the window and just kind of looks and peers over as they're moving on without him, and he kind of sees it all going up in smoke. But it's great. These whole sequences are great. I love it. And then again, I love this whole movie. I could talk about the scene. I could literally just go through this whole movie and talk about every scene for you. I literally could.
I'm going to cut you off for a second here because someone in our Discord server wrote in about this movie with their positive thoughts. And if you want to leave some positive thoughts on future movies we are covering, or if you just want to know what movies we are covering coming up, be sure you hop into our Discord server. There's a link right there in the show notes. What are you waiting for? Come and join us. Leave some comments just like Frankenwaffles has done. They say, Heavyweights is a fantastic movie. I really enjoy watching it as a sort of comfort movie. The way the tone shifts as the camp comes together is great. Mark Strong Award for me has to be Ben Stiller as Tony Perkis. The way he can turn on his public personality on command is true psychological behavior. Well done. I'm also a firm believer that following the events of the incident at Camp Hope, Tony had to do a rebrand and really buckle down on his fitness goals by founding Globo Gym. Yes, as we discussed, it is a short walk to go from Tony Perkis to White Goodman of Globo Gym. I think that's a solid fan theory for sure. And of course, we're agreeing with you as far as the Mark Strong Award. We both emphatically gave it to Ben Stiller for his performance. And Andrew, I like what they're saying here about this being a comfort movie. Even though I don't watch this movie quarterly, even though I haven't watched it in, 15, 20 years, I certainly can understand that because it is so good-natured and good-spirited. Even though there's like a villain antagonizing people about their weight, they find a way for the movie to have heart and have an ultimate message that I really like, and we'll get to as we talk about the finale. But yeah, this makes a lot of sense to me as a comfort movie.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's exactly what it is. Like, it's another, the it feels insensitive. Says the fat kids win. They sure. win, and there's just something that can be very comforting about that. And even they beat the weird fitness guru, and then they beat the jocks. It's a 1-2 punch of them getting the upper hand and them winning, and just again the comedy. Just I don't know what it is, and I guarantee you that I don't remember all the ins and outs of the movie from when I saw it as a kid in the movie theater. I know I remember seeing it, but I know a lot of this stuff was visiting it later. But it's just great. I have such a good time watching it, and it definitely is 100% a comfort movie where I can put it on, and for those 100 minutes, it's all okay.
As far as the Tony Perkis becomes White Goodman thing, I said earlier in this episode, the big difference is White Goodman is dumb. That's not really a character trait of Tony Perkis. However, Andrew, I'm looking at my notes, and I have this quote written down. Did you ever hear the story of Icarus, who continually rolled the ball up the hill, but when he got too close to the sun, the ball melted in the heat of the sun? You're all like Icarus. That's a Tony Perkis quote. That could be a White Goodman quote. Conflating these stories, getting it wrong. It's very much, that's me grabbing the bull by the horn. It's a metaphor, but that really happened. Very White Goodman energy. So maybe they are even closer than I was giving credit for earlier.
Yeah, that's definitely a moment where you're never really given a great, the whole way it's kind of presented throughout the movie is that Tony Perkis is not stupid. He's just deeply careless and completely out of touch. He even says it. He's being, educated by private tutors my whole life, I'm looking forward to interacting with children for the first time. Where he's basically admitting that I have no frame of reference for anything that you guys are doing, but I'm excited. And it's cool. This is another thing that would definitely never happen. But then again, I don't know. But that's definitely a moment where you're kind of is he adapting the story and just turning it into something more relevant to the kids and what they're currently doing? Or is he just an idiot or just one of those people that pontificates about things without having any real idea what they're about? And as somebody who does all of those things, I could say it's probably him just being dumb. But it's definitely a moment you're given where you're oh, maybe this guy really, truly, honestly doesn't know what he's doing and doesn't know what he's talking about. But yeah, but that is definitely the difference between them is Tony Perkis is pushing for this infomercial. He's put all this effort and work into it. It's bad and it's harmful, but he's still doing all this work and all this effort. And White Goodman, I guess, has his gym empire. There's work that goes into that. But in the presentation of the characters, again, both fabulous hair. But
yes,
it's definitely White Goodman is stupid. White Goodman is an idiot, and that's the biggest difference between them.
After they dispatch of Tony Perkis, there's this movie's a little unconventional in its setup here because you have this like final act. It's like we've defeated the bad guy, but that's not the climax of the movie. You know, the owner changes hands. Pat's now in charge of the camp. But like, what do we do from here? And the answer is they have this final relay race against their rival camp that they have every year. And this is talked about a few times throughout the movie, but not really set up as like, oh, we want to beat him this year or whatever. Like, it's kind of just mentioned, and then all of a sudden, that's our climax of the movie. So there's a little bit of a shift here to get to this point, and they do end up victorious. The Josh shaving comes into play here because one of the events is shaving a balloon without popping it, which he can do because we learned earlier he's already shaving. So it's like a Slumdog Millionaire moment where everyone has like something from their past that comes into play, and Jerry sat in the go-kart earlier and went around the track with Pat, so of course he's the one that's gonna be good at driving the go-kart. And there's this moment where they're triumphant, and again, to kind of using the language of the movie, the fat kids win, and it's a feel-good moment. But the message here, which is said explicitly after they get rid of Tony Perkis and they have a night of excess, eating junk food and passing out on the lawn, Pat brings them on together, and he's like, what do we want this to be? What do we want to represent? How do we want to live our lives? And he talks about personal responsibility and just doing the right thing and being a little bit responsible. And I like this message here because it can be a tricky situation where you have these kids that are at a weight loss camp. So like weight loss is the goal and healthy, and that's okay. But obviously the way that our villain is going about it is all wrong. But do you dismiss the idea of being healthy, or do you lean into like kids should lose weight? It's a tricky thing. So they just land on like, take care of yourself, believe in yourself, be responsible, and the rest is going to work itself out. You'll be healthy, you'll lose weight if that's your goal. Just have some self-esteem, self-respect is the goal, now the message of Camp Hope, which I think is nice. It's a nice message, and it's a little, maybe a little sloppy to get there because we've got kind of two competing ideas here with overthrowing the bad guy and then this ultimate message of hope. But I can't get too mad at it when I feel so good watching it, if that makes sense. Like, I like the message so much that I'm like, that might have been a little clunky, but like, I'm not mad about giving this positive message to kids and to 35-year-old kids like me.
Yeah. It's interesting because like they do mention like, it's during the sequence where they're doing like the gliding back and forth, and Tony Perkis mentions, I see no reason we can't beat Camp MVP in the Apache Relay, and Jerry's the one that's like, what's an Apache Relay? And then they kind of say, it's when they come over and they kick our butts every year. And then there's a game against Camp MVP. They do a baseball, softball game or something. And they dominate them. They stomp them. So they do establish the camp. And then Camp MVP are like, they deface the camp. They come over and they yell insults at them. They're just real jerks. Like, it's genuinely like, how is an adult not stepped in and been like, okay, like,
most valuable pricks, more like it. Am I
right? Yeah, nailed it. First try. But it's so they build to this final thing, and it's kind of that idea of just like, we're gonna be better. We're gonna do some self-control. We're gonna have some personal responsibility, and it leads to this Apache Relay, which has tons of fun gags that I love. Like, they the athletes are like storming through the obstacle course. So like, obviously the kids are struggling. They're trying, like the kid can't climb the wall. They have to like help him and start lifting him up the wall. Like Roy's the one who throws the football through the tire. Obviously Josh is the one that does the shaving. And then they get to that like hall of knowledge, and that's when they catch up and Nicholas just knows everything. I love this scene in the hall of knowledge just because the Chuck just knows nothing. Like he truly honestly can't figure out any of this. This is where you get like Kenny the cameraman is dressed as Albert Einstein, and Lars is dressed as Andy Warhol, and Nurse Julie is dressed as the Statue of Liberty, and they're having a lot of fun with these questions. And I just love when Lars, just again, I mentioned it before, when the guy's like, "Share," and he just looks at the painting and goes, "No, just what is wrong with you?"
The Mona Lisa.
Yeah, can't figure out the Mona Lisa. But I love it all. I think these are fun. I love the vice presidential question where the kid from England knows all the American vice presidents, but the American doesn't. Which, to be fair,
which I what was it, 6 they have to name?
5, I think.
5.
And
Can you name 5 vice presidents?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Joe Biden was Obama's. Obama had Kamala.
Obama had Kamala?
I'm sorry. Joe Biden had Kamala. Sorry. George Bush had Dick Cheney.
Mm-hmm.
What am I at? 3? Bill Clinton. I don't know.
Super serial man.
Al Gore. Okay. I didn't know it though, so I won't take that one. I know George Sr. was vice president before, so that's what
he was.
4.
So you have Kamala with Biden, you had Pence with Trump, you had
Pence,
you had Biden with Obama, you had Cheney with Bush, you had Gore with Clinton, you had Quayle with HW, which is one of the ones they name in the movie.
Never.
You had and then it was
George Bush
HW with Reagan.
Yeah.
I believe Carter was Walter Mondale. Nixon had a bunch. One of them was Spiro Agnew. LBJ was JFK's vice president. You can go back further there, and there you go. And even early on, like several of the first 10 or 15 presidents were all vice presidents first. Like John Adams was George Washington.
Yeah, I can name the first 10 or 15 presidents, Andrew. Yeah, no problem. Yeah. I am the American that the English kid is making fun of. This movie's great. It's I love the like I said, the message at the end. I already talked about. And there's just so many great gags. I'm looking at my notes. I didn't write a ton of notes because I was just really just enjoying this movie. But there's definitely a few I wanted to take note of. Like a joke I definitely did not understand as a kid watching the movie is. And I'm kind of curious if you think this is a direct reference. When Josh comes back to camp, that's a One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest reference, right?
Yes.
Yeah, he walks in like he's been lobotomized, but he's just pulling a gag, much like McMurphy does.
Yep.
In Cuckoo's Nest, which of course I would not understand as a kid, or any kid watching this would get, but it is still funny. I love the line from Tony Perkis during his first big presentation as the new owner of the camp, which, again, could totally be in a White Goodman commercial. He says, "Now I eat success for breakfast with skim milk." So good.
Yep.
I love this joke from Pat where they're on the, I think it's while they're on the bus and he's trying to get the new kids and he asks Jerry, "Where are you from?" And he says, "Long Island." And he goes, "Never heard of it." I'm stealing that now. I'm going to ask people where they're from and they can give you the most popular city or state. And I'm just going to say I'd never heard of it. I think that's a good joke.
I like when Pat is driving and he's like, got an old ritual. New kid drives the bus. And he's like, "You drive a stick, right?" And he's like, "No, but I can try." And he's like, "Oh, no. Pulls him aside. But you can clearly tell Pat just, like, if you had told me that Tom McGowan had literally grown up at a summer camp and these kids were all that, like, I believe it. Like, the relationship they all have just comes across completely, utterly genuine.
Yeah.
I mentioned it before. I do want to mention the body system scene just because I love it. But like, it starts off with Lars is standing on the dock and he yells at one kid. He's like, "Hey, don't pee in the water." And he goes to the other kid. He's like, "Hey, don't drink the water. He peed in it." Like, just and then like while he's running down the dock, he keeps shoving kids into the water while he's catching up to the nurse. And then that's when he does the whole, "I've got them on the body system." And I love that they all are buddied up except Josh, who's just sitting on the dock by himself. And when he raises his hand up for the buddy system, there's nobody there. So he's got no buddy, so he's just sitting on the dock. Like, just a weird little thing.
Or he does have a buddy, and his buddy is drowning. And the buddy system... it's like that joke in The Simpsons where Bart and Lisa are buddies, and they both get lost together. And so Principal Seymour is like, "Everybody got their buddy?" They're like, "Yeah." He's like, the buddy system, flawless as ever.
Flawless as ever.
If both buddies are lost, it's really
not effective. Yeah. I love the scene where they're doing all the before and after pictures, And at one point, somebody puts the sign on their butt, and Lars goes to take a picture, and it breaks the camera. And he just
takes
goes,
like 5 pictures real fast.
And he just looks and he goes, "You've broken my camera."
That is good.
Lars is just so fun. Even later when he's just like, "I'm feeling skinny, Tony." Like, just as they go back and forth around, it's just wonderful.
There's so many good like little moments. I love. There's a scene where Tony goes into the cabin to confiscate all the candy. It might be after that. He revisits them later, and he gives Kenan Thompson a hug.
That's the scene. That's the scene.
Same scene. Okay.
Yeah.
Watching that scene, Ben Stiller and Kenan Thomas hugging. I want to know. I'm curious if surely since Kenan's been an adult, he's come across Ben Stiller. I wonder if they talk about this movie. Like, hey, remember that movie we made together? Yeah, they got to have stories together. Yeah. But he hugs him, but really he wants to give him a pat down to find contraband. And he finds a Pez in his sock.
Yep.
Dude, he pulls open the Pez. He's like, what's this? He slides the head open and drops the candy out, but the sound effects are a gun. Like he's unloading a gun like and clips are hitting the ground. It's so... I don't know if subtle's the right word, but it's probably a joke that it's like you funny, but maybe it's funny, but don't quite register why, because it kind of works, like hearing those sounds, but it's very clearly a firearm, but it's a little Pez candy. I thought that was just. I
also love that,
so
like
funny.
he knocks. The whole point is he opens the head, dumps the Pez into his hand, and then throws the Pez behind him. But like all the Pez miss his hand, and he throws like nothing behind him basically when he's chucking it to the side. This scene I do like. It's great too. The one kid rats him out and he finds their whole treasure trove. And at one point he just literally picks up a salami. And I don't know why the delivery lives in my head, but he just goes, "Oh, look, a deli meat." And then he like flips it to the side. Also, like, I get that like a lot of the candy is bad, but I'm like, if the kid wants to hoard deli meat, like what's wrong with that? Like, it's of all the things he could have, it's not the worst.
They're high in
sodium.
Saturated fats and sodium. That's what I was trying to think of. Yeah, a lot of water weight in those. I love, Frankenwolf, he wrote in and he talked about Tony being able to turn on his public persona on a dime, which I agree is so funny. I love when they're weighing in to see their progress, and he's filming for the infomercial, and he weighs a couple of kids and they've gained weight. And at first he's like, "Oh, that's okay. We'll, adjust your regimen." But after the second kid, he's like, "Cut the camera."
Increases metabolic output.
That's it. He's like, "Cut the camera," and then he chastises them all. And then he says, "All right, start rolling." And he says, "All right, Josh, get on the scale, son." And as soon as he steps on, get off the scale.
Get off the scale.
It's so good.
I love it. He's like, stop recording, and he's like hyping himself up, and he's like, "How you doing, little Tony?" "Bad." Why do you feel bad?" He's like, "Because it's not working." Like, he's having this like internal monologue with himself. But I also love the beginning of this scene where like Kenny is standing pointing the camera at him, and Ben Stiller like runs past him, and he's like, "Wait, I'm not rolling yet." And he's like, and so Ben Stiller like awkwardly walks back to his starting point, and then he's like, "Are you rolling now, Kenneth?" I also love that he calls him Kenneth instead of Kenny the cameraman. He actually calls him Kenneth. And at one point he goes, "Speed," and Ben Stiller's like, "Does that mean rolling?" And he's like, "Yes, it does."
This movie is fantastic. I watched it on Disney Plus. It seems like Disney is no longer ashamed of this movie, or whatever the story was with its initial release, but it is streaming. If you haven't seen it, I mean, gosh, I hope you've watched it before you listen to us spoil everything, but you will still enjoy it. There's so many gags. I really can't recommend this enough. Andrew, last week I introduced a scale for rewatching nostalgic movies or movies from my childhood. They're either going to fall under Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or Power Rangers. Ninja Turtles being, this is a genuinely great movie that holds up and I still enjoy for what it is today. Power Rangers being, this is a little bit more campy and nostalgic, and I like it now because I liked it then. This is a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film. I think it holds up incredibly well. I think it's got a great message. I think it's incredibly funny. I think it's a great early performance from Ben Stiller. We've praised the hell out of already. Everything still works. And off the top of my head, there's not really stuff that aged too poorly, which when you're dealing with something like this, you expect. But the guys who are supposed to be the bad guys might make some jokes at the kids' expense, but it's never even a joke. Like, you're supposed to be like, oh, that's too far.
They're bad.
I think it all works.
Bad people.
The only thing I could even remotely
is they wear like the Native American stuff at the end, but like it's not done in like a condescending, mocking way like it tends to be. But overall, I do love the moment that it kind of ends on, where like they win the Apache relay and they get the cup and everything, and the jocks are just like incensed and they're like, we're filing a formal protest, we want the cup, blah blah blah. I don't know why they're doing this. They clearly lost. Like, I don't know what their claim to having it is. And Pat says, you know what, fine, you can have it. And he has one of the kids just chuck it into the lake because they don't need the trophy. The victory they have is the one they all shared together, and they know it, and no trophy is ever going to take that from them. And I like that notion that it lands on, of the kids have kind of finally come full circle and realized that they need to find the right balance. Pat has a lot more confidence in himself because he starts off this movie, he can't even talk to the nurse. I love that scene where she shows up and she's like, could you point me to where the infirmary is? And Pat's just like, no. It's like, you've been coming to this camp since you were 10 and you don't know where the infirmary is. And he's like, I panicked. And so throughout the whole movie, Pat himself is kind of insecure around Julie, even though there's clearly a mutual attraction there. That ultimately does come to fruition, which is, nice to see. The scene where like they're all going crazy, Pat wants to go join them, and Julie's the one that's like, hey, why don't you hang out with me instead? And Pat's like, yeah, let's do that. And it's just great, man. This movie's wonderful.
Andrew, as we've made our way through summer camp month, a sort of ongoing, I don't know if debate's the right word, but I sort of had this thought that, like, did summer camps ever really exist, or are these made up in movies? And I think part of me knows that, yeah, summer camps are a real thing, but they've got to be exaggerated. And I think this movie we covered this week, Heavyweights, has maybe the most absurd notion where there's no way this was ever reality. What I mean by that is Jerry comes home on his last day of school, finds out he's going to this camp, gets on an airplane to fly to presumably another state, where he meets up at the airport with a bunch of other kids that are going there. They go to camp. They're there for what feels like at least a month. There's multiple weigh-ins. And then there's a parents' day. Not last day of camp, a parents' day where the parents come and visit them to see how they're doing. So these parents are getting on planes to fly somewhere, to visit them for one day, to fly home before the kid flies home. They've got to be there 2-3 months, all of summer. Is this a real thing?
I don't know.
We've been talking about these movies all month. This is probably something I could very easily Google.
Why would you do that?
I have not. Why would I do that? I'm sure I'll just be saying the same thing next week when we talk about Wet Hot American Summer. But before we get there, Andrew, right now it's time for question of the week. And if you want to leave us a question for a future episode, you can do exactly that by hopping into our Discord server. If you haven't joined us already, there's a link there in your show notes. Come and join us. What are you waiting for? Leave a question just like Groffles has done, and here's what they ask. So I realized something about myself listening to the special episode you had with 1957 versus 1999 movie debate. Bonus episode. Go back and listen if you haven't already. Thank you. And I believe I already know your answer to this. My question is, do you know if a movie releases in a certain decade that you are less likely to watch it ever or more than one time? I learned that if a movie has released in the 60s or before, I'm very unlikely to ever watch it unless it is lauded as a seminal film classic. Good examples of what I have watched typically one time despite when it was released have been Citizen Kane, Roman Holiday, Casablanca, 2001, To Kill a Mockingbird, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, The Graduate, the Sean Connery Bond movies, and possibly more. But honestly, I doubt too many more. Okay, so if I'm digging into this question, is there like maybe a cutoff period where movies before then you typically don't visit unless they are an all-time great film. Andrew, do you have a sort of a divide in your line between modern films and classic films, and does that affect your likelihood of watching said movie?
No.
Interesting. All in the same playing field.
The movie's good and I want to rewatch it, I'm going to rewatch it.
What about watching it for the first time? If someone's recommending a movie to you, and like, hey, check out this movie, it's a comedy from 10 years ago, versus, hey, I like this drama from the 1940s, is that going to hold any weight?
Chris, I'm not going to watch any of those weird movies you keep recommending to me. Stop trying to trap me.
Tammy and the T-Rex is my newest recommendation. I think.
I know. Generally speaking, I'm going to like look into a movie if someone recommends it to me, and I'm going to check it out. But like a movie that I love watching is Arsenic and Old Lace. It is an old comedy with Cary Grant from the 50s, the 60s. I forget exactly what year it comes out. But that movie is just super funny. And it's actually 44. I'm really not smart. It is 1944 black comedy film. And I watch that movie again, like probably 2 or 3 times a year. If a movie enters into my brain, it's gonna go. And
yet you watch Heavyweights from the 90s 4 times a year. Very telling, Andrew.
I didn't say there was no personal biases at play here, Chris. I just said that the decade of which the movie is released has no bearing on it.
I see. Andrew, I thought that would be your answer, and I believe you with what you're saying. I think I know where Groffles is coming from here, and I think I just, in general, find movies released from my lifetime, basically, to be more accessible. And I'm probably more likely to watch, like, I'll watch a movie from the 80s or 90s that's just, it wasn't a big hit. That's just, I've heard a recommendation. But odds are, the farther I go back, I'm probably not casually watching movies from the 50s or 40s. Probably not. Right? Like, I'm probably watching one of my criterions, which means, like, it's selected as a significant film or whatever. So I think there's something to that. And I do, in general, find it easier to connect with movies with more modern sensibilities. But would I say that the decade release affects my initial want to watch it? I would like to say no. I mean, I would like to say no, but I think ultimately I'm agreeing with your answer, Andrew, but I understand where Groffles is coming from. Maybe I'm somewhere in the middle here. As I kind of wrestle to come with like a concrete stamp on where I land here, but I mean, I get where Groffles is coming from, but I like to, I've been watching movies a long time, Andrew. You could say my whole life. I've been a big fan of movies forever, but I feel like I'm still evolving as a film buff, film fan, or whatever you want to call it. This podcast has certainly made a big impact on how I watch movies. But to bring up Vinegar Syndrome once more, this boutique Blu-ray label we've talked about a few times, they have this box set that I actually happen to have right next to me called the Lost Picture Show. It's a collection of 10 films, I want to say. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That were at one point lost to time. No existing prints existed. Vinegar Syndrome found a print, restored these movies, has committed them to this box set. But here's the thing. Most, if not all of these movies aren't good. And they're not being presented as like lost gems where we finally get to watch them. Vinegar Syndrome's whole thing is about the importance of preserving film. From their perspective, if a movie has been made, then it is worth preserving. And there was an essay in this box set, which is why I bring it up, that put it in a way that I haven't thought of before. And it said, every movie is a window to a world. Right? It's that director's and that team's vision. They created a whole other world. And it's our responsibility to preserve that. No matter what's on the other side, no matter how objectionable, within reason, good or bad or quality, it deserves to be preserved. And I just think that's a really interesting way to look at movies. And you could watch a movie that is quote unquote not good, but still get something out of it. Just the idea of like these people had money. This is what they decided to create. This was their swing. This is their vision. And so I'm just finding more ways to connect with film. And to bring it around to Groffel's question, this helps me with watching movies that are quote unquote before my era, before my time. It's just trying to connect with the different sensibilities and more ways to appreciate a film rather than just based on quality. Because, well, I agree. If I'm watching a movie from before the 80s, it's probably because it's lauded as a classic. But I think it's important to try to connect with the casual film of those times for just that reason, just for appreciating film. Appreciating a window into a specific world.
I agree. I think, I have lots of films on my shelf. Like you talk about the Vinegar Syndrome. I just got the Martin Scorsese World Cinema Project Volume 1, which is like Martin Scorsese just picking a bunch of movies from around the world and kind of presenting them in these kind of high quality presentations. And I got Volume 1 specifically because it has a movie called The Housemaid in it, which is a kind of a horror film. This is basically the only way you can get it. There's no real other way to really kind of find it. And it is a South Korean film, basically a kind of horror film, as it were. And those are the things that kind of stand out to me. I'm kind of looking for the things that I go to the movies every week. I watch movies all the time. I love plenty of big, accessible, big budget stuff, but then you start diving in and you see the movies that like filmmakers talk about as being their favorite. You see the movies that other people talk about as being their favorites. Like, Mia Goth talking about Maxine mentioned Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown. And I read about it and I was like, that sounds like a movie I'd want to watch. And so I went and I got it and I'll plan to watch it.
Christopher Nolan talking about the importance of MacGruber
right.
on his life and his style.
I hate you. But just that idea that like, I think we've mentioned it before, and it's there's this notion that like there's so many movies that I've seen, and there are so many movies that I own that I've seen, and there are so many movies that I'll never get to see, and it can be a daunting thing, and so I really don't like to limit myself to anything that I watch.
I think we answered your question, Groffles, maybe and then some, but thank you so much for the question. And I want to hear your thoughts, everyone out there. Do you find that you're drawn to more modern films or films that came out within your lifetime? Do you have trouble going back to previous decades? I think sometimes, like as film lovers, we don't want to admit that there's some kind of hesitation there, or we wrestle with it. Certainly, I do, maybe more than you, but I'm curious what everyone's thoughts on this. Very interesting question. And let us know. Hop into that Discord. Join us. Join the conversation and come back next week as we wrap up Summer Camp Month with, legitimately, spill the beans here a little bit. Top 5 comedy for me, a movie that I love that I can't wait to talk about. Wet Hot American Summer next week. Be there. And until then, just remember that maybe not every movie is great.
But all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. You can check him out on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony, and thanks to Mitch for the music. Follow him on Twitter, and I'm the Biggie Boy, and check our show notes for the SoundCloud link. Check out our store on TeePublic for some Best of the Rest merch, and if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. That is the only way that we grow. Follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you. He's there as the host. He's the glue of that of those sketches. He's like this generation's Tom Arnold on that show, and I just think he's extremely talented. But he's never
Tom Arnold.
God damn it! I did it again. Sorry, you're so disappointed in me, dude. Tom Arnold and Phil Hartman are interchangeable in my brain. Like, I know the difference, but I think of one and say the other. Wow.
At least you don't think they look alike.
They kind of do.
No, they don't. They do not.